Hey, everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to The Element Podcast.
I gotta get all up in something, cause something's all up inside of me.
What's happening, all my woods people? It is spring. The birds are beeping. The bees are buzzing. The grass is popping and it's greening. KC, what else is happening this spring?
The vetch is growing up the chain link.
That's what I was kind of looking at. These birds are going crazy up in the stuff.
Yeah, it's time to fish. We've actually done some fishing.
Yeah, we did fishing yesterday.
It's good stuff, man. We got away in the afternoon on a beautiful sunny day, which it's not today. I'm surprised.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of cloudy, but and got to go chase some of the scaly friends that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These, man, I hate to get off subject, but these feathered friends over here, I kind of been thinking about the whole time. Yeah, that we've been sitting here. I'm like looking at them, and I'm like, they're picking up. There's a ton of trash over here, you know, from in this parking lot, and I'm like looking at them, and I'm thinking they keep pulling the trash out and like flying off to their nest, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe trash isn't all bad. You know, like maybe there's some
Sparrow nests usually are made of baling twine.
Yeah.
More than anything, it seems like. So
I don't know. I just, maybe it's not the trash that's not bad, but it's the bird that's resourceful. You know what I mean?
You know, those birds you're looking at are a non-native invasive. So
Are you talking about the house finches?
No. Are you looking at a house finch right now?
I was. That's what I've seen a lot of.
I've been seeing these European starlings.
Starlings.
Yeah.
Oh, sparrows.
Well, yeah, there's European starlings out there too.
Yeah, I saw the starlings earlier. Yeah.
So,
anyway,
cool.
so we went fishing yesterday, and it was fun. It was fun. It could have been better, I think, for me at least.
We think that possibly the first time we went to this place was as good as it ever gets, and so we got super spoiled and fooled by like that aspect, right? So from here on out, unless we hit it just perfect again, it's never going to be as good as the first time when we lucked into it.
What is it about us and like firsts? Like, for instance, 2 of the fish we caught yesterday were like right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then we do that a lot. Like we'll catch something right off the bat and then nothing will bite forever. We did that. I went crappie fishing the other day and we caught fish. I mean, when we got to the spot we wanted to fish, it was like right off the bat, first cast, got a crappie in the boat. This is about to be awesome. And then we fish all afternoon and catch 4. You know, it's like, what? I don't understand.
Fishing's that way a lot in general, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it was when we went crappie fishing the other day to an extent. It was, my dad hammered 3 off the same stump in the first 10 minutes, and then after that it was like a grind trying to pull another crappie in.
I don't get it. Anyway. Yeah, we you caught some stripers, man. That was cool.
It was cool. None of them were real big ones. There were guys around us catching a few big ones, but they were fishing different tactics than we were. And
much different.
Somewhat intrusive to our fishing, but sometimes it's just combat fishing, man.
It was.
Whenever you're on the bank, people congregate at spillways and stuff like that, like people are going to just push their limits with you, especially when there's a language barrier. They feel like they can get away with more, I think. Maybe we do too. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, it definitely, I told you yesterday, but I feel like maybe because there's more people that have done this, or I think it's definitely one reason, but, there's a lot of people, I guess, that have, especially in the Northwest, do steelhead fishing, right? And they talk about it's the fish of 1,000 casts or whatever. And I feel like that these stripers are the fish of 1,000 casts.
At least a big one, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've caught some smaller ones, but like something like a 8 or 10 pounder plus. You know what I mean? And I have made 1,000 casts in this spot at least, and I have not caught one. And you've caught one of that size, right?
Was the first time.
Yeah, it was the first time. There you go. So
first time I ever went.
And it is combative. And, I had to, these guys are casting big surf rod type deals, like big cork and jig or whatever they've got underneath it. And they're throwing them, how far are they throwing? They're 75 yards?
At least, if not further, yeah. I think one time, that guy was yelling at a guy across the river. I think they were hooked up. I think a guy across the river and this guy were hooked up with each other.
This is a giant river.
Yeah.
They were throwing it way out there. And so, what they do is they fish this thing downstream really far and, let it swing. And then when it gets down at, 45 or whatever, they just start reeling it, and they reel it all the way in, which takes 2 minutes, or whatever. It's they're reeling fast, and it takes, a good, 60 seconds for real, though. And as a fly fisherman, we're covering the first we're covering 15 yards from the bank, and so I'm not being very intrusive, I don't feel like, but this guy, I guess with we are being intrusive in our tactic, maybe, I guess, because it's different than what's the norm there. But basically, when this guy after his first half of his drift, I can't really cast back upriver because his line is angled down towards me the whole time, and so maybe 40% or less of my casts are actually I feel in the zone for fish.
Yeah, and this I've got a good analogy for this. Sometimes I have analogies that don't make sense. This one's going to make sense.
Okay.
When you're driving in Dallas traffic and you're trying to figure out the whole scheme of things, and you're getting comfortable in the traffic, and you're like, okay, that's a safe distance from this truck. I'm going to stay back off this 18-wheeler this far. And everybody's cool, and then somebody goes right in front of you because their safe distance is half of what you think it is. That's how this fishing is. Because you find your little hole, oh, there's a guy over there, and there's a guy over here, and we can all fish happily. And then 2 or 3 people come in between you in the gaps.
Yeah.
Well, dude, gummit.
Yeah. How about that first guy? The first time we fished the river there yesterday.
He was trying to stand on Tyler's shoes.
Oh my gosh! I literally had my KC caught a fish, right? So I go grab the camera. My rod is sitting right there, all with line everywhere, sitting right there where I was just at. I go video him with the fish, and it hadn't been 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever. I've get him, with the fish, and this guy, as we're videoing this fish being about to be released, hops in right beside my rod there. And I'm like, what the heck? So I just go back to my rod and start fishing, and he has no qualms about it, no issue. He doesn't nudge down at all or anything, And so we just fish 15 feet apart. You know what I mean? I was like, if this thing hooks him, because it was real windy, I was like, ain't my fault. I ain't gonna feel bad about it one bit. I'm just gonna back cast, and if he's there, that's what
He'll
happens.
learn.
That's right. So
well, after that little experience, we decided to go maybe hunt some different quarry and do a little bit of really it's sight fishing, spot and stalk, you could say.
Ooh, spotty and stalky.
And Tyler actually it was a really cool catch. This carp was really down deep. And Tyler has these little special beetle patterns that he lost one in the wind and finally had another one left.
Yep.
And I actually was spotting from afar for Tyler, and he didn't even know that fish was there. Spotted the fish, he cast to it, and laid it in there perfect. And this fish comes up.
KC was like, "Here he's coming up," and I'm looking at him. I can start to see him, and I'm thinking, "Oh, well maybe he's just coming under my bait, so now I can see him, It literally was the slowest rise ever.
Oh my gosh. I remember thinking when this fish rose on the fly, I'm like, Tyler's going to miss this fish. Not because you're bad at this, but I knew like that was so slow. He's going to set too early, and you didn't. I was so proud of you when it happened but I just knew it was like, man, that's a slow rise. He's going to set too early. It's going to happen, and it didn't. It worked, and Tyler landed him a nice little carp there.
Yeah, it was one of the smaller grass carp we've seen.
Yeah, it was. But it was cool.
It was he's probably 7 pounds or so, but he was, we've seen some. This beetle pattern I created, and I based off of another pattern that I had seen, and I guess maybe last summer, maybe the summer before, I had been out there by myself in this area and seen a big grass carp, like a 30-pounder out there, and I laid this beetle out in front of him, and he came up and did the same thing, slow sip. I set the hook, and this thing was so huge that I just basically broke on the hook set yesterday, or that time. And that's one thing we have an issue with, is like with so many rocks and concrete around, like you're going to have a freight line, But anyway, yeah, it is a spot and stalk kind of fishing out there. And
speaking of spot and stalk,
we are talking to a guy about spot and stalk type of hunting today. Trevon Stoltzfus. Did I say that right?
You said it right.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit more. So Trevon's name's a lot harder when you have an East Texas draw because you slow it down,
Yeah,
Stoltzfus. And the faster you say it, the better it sounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, Trevon's
it's German though, right?
Yeah.
Which is Texas. Which is a Texan thing. So.
German is Texas.
German is a Texan thing. You know what I mean?
For sure. Lots of Germans around. Anyways, Trevon is with Outback Outdoors and the Inspired Wild podcast and a plethora of other things.
Yep.
Had a film in a lot of different film festivals too, but most recently in the Badlands Film Festival that is showcased at the ATA show. A really cool film, a lot different than his normal stuff. It was a film called Adopted, kind of his story with his relationship with his dad. Pretty cool little film. And then they do a lot of hunting from the ground, right?
Yeah.
Like most of their stuff is what you would call spot and stalk style hunting, and of course they're doing some elk calling and they do some eastern whitetail type stuff every once in a while too. But I think that that is something that we don't do much with eastern style hunting, and I think that we probably shouldn't do it as much as they do. But I don't think that we should write it off as a tactic, because.
You're talking about in Eastern style hunting.
Eastern style in the East, right?
Yeah.
So east of the plains, I think anywhere there's trees, we usually write off the whole like spot and stalk from the ground. But how many times have we seen deer, walking in on an afternoon that don't know you're there yet? It happens often enough, right? And I think that like we can learn some stuff, maybe even not to quite spot and stalk, but just some tactics and some like style of what they do that can help us as whitetail hunters.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I mean, I think there is opportunity to do that in these settings, and I don't know. I have stalked a few. I've shot a few deer from the ground. Stalked a buck. I guess I can remember at least one that I've shot that I stalked, and I used to, out there at the lodge, I used to stalk ducks every single day. And I think that just like my confidence in the game of stalking is pretty high, even though I don't do it for whitetails much. So maybe I should like play to that strength a little more,
Possibly.
in some of these situations. But it is tough. I know when you're videoing stuff to make good video happen, especially if you don't have a crew like Trevon has, to make a good video when you're stalking. We had to use a lot of GoPro and just handheld shaky footage last year on our stalk on those bucks. So, but that's just the way it goes. But anyway, so one thing that we did a little bit of stalking. But we really didn't get any footage from the stalk was turkey hunting recently. And I'm really excited to announce that our turkey film has finally dropped and it is available to be watched on YouTube.
Film called Hooked.
The film's called Hooked. And, man, I'm super proud of it. It is like, I don't know. We've been trying to develop our style, and there are different types of hunting and hunts and different seasons and stuff that we're going to use different styles, right? Anyway, it's not just like we're going to have one style, but this is like from a film perspective, from an art perspective, this is what I think we're falling into, and we're trying to develop this as being like something that you would see and think that's those guys. You know what I mean? Even if you didn't see our faces, and so. I'm really proud of it from an art perspective, and we did some really, really fun things with it, and we had some really just beautiful shots. I mean, that's just like part of spring, right? It's just like your footage can be beautiful during whitetail season, but it's going to be brown. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And this just has so much color to it.
It's vibrant. You know,
is.
That's just really the kind of one of the takeaways is that the world seems so alive in turkey season.
I know, man.
It's cool.
I know it. That's why fishing and turkey hunting are an exciting thing, I think, man. It's just like things are waking up, you know? Mm-hmm. But anyway, I think it's probably time to get some stalking information because I'm looking forward to attempting a lot of this next year as we did this year.
Ooh, yes, let's do it.
Anyway, let's get him on the phone. All right, so now on the phone we have Trevon Stoltzfus of Outback Outdoors and Inspired Wild Podcast. Trevon, did I say it right?
You did.
Right.
You did a fine job.
Thank you, sir.
Good job, man.
Man, I love people when people give me compliments like that. I don't get those anymore. I used to have to work really hard for those when I played football, you know, and get them here and there, and so it feels good, man. Thanks.
Well, that's saying something. You're in Texas. Playing football in Texas is like no other place on earth.
That's right, man. That's right. Now, did you grow up pretty close here to Texas, or where did you grow up?
I was born in Texas.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
I was born in El Paso.
Yeah, I thought you lived out there.
A lot of people think that's more like Mexico than Texas.
It's a little bit separate, man. It really is.
Yeah. I grew up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, so just on the New Mexico border but I was born in El Paso. I used to live in Stephenville.
Oh,
all right, dude.
For quite a while. Yeah. I rode bulls professionally for about 4.5 years and I lived in Stephenville. So.
All right. Was that who was it that lived? Was it Tough that lived down there, or Ty or something? Or am I wrong on all that?
Ty lived just down the street.
Gotcha.
I lived with Adam and Gilbert Carrillo.
Okay.
And Jim Sharp was. I mean, this is 94, 95, 96. That time frame. So.
Gotcha. Were you a Kurt Cobain fan?
Yeah.
No, that was the years right there. Like I think he died in 94, right?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked Nirvana.
Gotcha.
For sure.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, who didn't at least dip their toe into the grunge bands? Come on, let's
For
be
real.
honest.
For real.
I mean, you got Jerry Jeff Walker. You got some real good Texas red dirt type, stuff going on. But then there's all the popular culture and
sure.
What was that? I Saw the Sign. What was that band? I Saw the Sign.
Yeah, and I opened up my eyes. I saw the sign.
If you were living during that time period, I mean, who didn't like that?
Yeah, dude.
I mean, just enough. Marky Mark.
It was musical. Yeah. It was musical. It wasn't like. There were still instruments and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Well, I was a grunge junkie. I didn't know. I knew grunge before.
I will be honest. Pearl Jam, I was much more Eddie Vedder fan than I was Cobain.
I'm an Eddie Vedder guy too, man. Eddie Vedder's he's got one of those top 10 voices, man. He's just so good.
Yeah, you're not sure if he's really a good singer or because it's like. I mean, honestly, yeah.
It's extreme control.
I'm kind of an old metalhead. I mean, I graduated high school in 1989.
Gotcha.
So I'm a classic Western music, not country. I'm talking old style, Merle Haggard. Old music.
Gotcha.
I grew up. I have fond memories of being on the tractor, and we had an AM radio in the tractor, and the only station it always stayed tuned on was a classic country station, and so Loretta Lynn and Merle Haggard and old Johnny Cash, stuff like that. So I grew up listening a lot to that. So I have a tremendous respect and love for old classic country, which I call Western music, trying to diversify from the pop music that they call country now. But, one thing I have learned is that if you listen to anything long enough, you can find appreciation for it.
Sure, man. Absolutely. Yeah. So were you in Stephenville after high school, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was.
So did you play ball in El Paso? You playing football or anything out there? Yeah.
Dude, I'm 5'8", 135 pounds.
Dude, I played with 5'8" that were beasts, man.
I wasn't in high school. I graduated high school. I weighed 109 pounds.
Yeah,
I was a wrestler.
That's pretty small.
Yeah, you're like a power lifter.
I was a wrestler.
Ah.
So that was my sport, and I wrestled through, of course, junior high school, on into college. And my junior year in high school, I got the chance to wrestle in the 1988 Olympic World Trials, and went to Brazil and Argentina to wrestle their national teams stuff. So,
cool.
Wrestling was my sport, but I didn't rodeo in high school because of wrestling, and I started rodeoing when I walked away from wrestling. Like literally the weekend after I walked away from wrestling, I said, I'm gonna enter the bronc riding.
Yeah.
And then I started riding bulls, and so it was sports that I excelled at were, I did pretty good in soccer, but wrestling was definitely right up my alley. But I came from a wrestling family. My uncle wrestled for Iowa State. My dad wrestled for University of New Mexico.
Wow.
So
cool, man.
I had a lot of that in the background. Yeah.
That's awesome. So pretty driven family, pretty driven guy, I would say, jumping straight into some rodeo. So what's been going on with you the first quarter of this year or so?
The first quarter's been show seasons, and I do a lot of seminars, kind of speaking at different events, and now we are in full swing turkey season.
Yeah.
So last week I had I actually film. I hunt with a lot of younger individuals, the youth of America. I love to take kids out and film them. Not that I'm necessarily, they might be with their dad or somebody else, but I just like to film that.
Gotcha.
We forget as adults that wide-eyed wonder when the sun rises and the woods come alive. And so every time I film a kid, I feel like it takes me back there. So I'm hoping I'm doing the same thing when we're producing our shows and sharing that adventure. I'm hoping we're doing the same thing. So, but I got to do that. Levi Ray, 7-year-old in Missouri, and he's hilarious. And he killed a good tom. And then my daughter was in Colorado, the opener of Colorado. So,
man, was there snowbirds up there in Colorado this year?
You mean
yeah,
snowbirds as in
turkeys in the snow? I feel like everybody had snow on their opener. It seemed like.
Well, yeah. I thought. Sorry, I think of snowbirds.
No,
as
not
people.
That
Go to Phoenix.
yeah, not old people avoiding the snow.
Yeah. Yes. A lot of snow. Nebraska opens March 25th, I think it is. So you're usually going to get one or two snowstorms if you're hunting turkeys in Nebraska. I cannot tell you the number of times I've been sitting in a blind and it's been snowing, and I'm just glad to be in a blind so I'm not getting snowed on in Nebraska. But Colorado, it's a little bit rarer, or more rare, because of the fact that it does start middle of April. But yeah, the difference is, it snows, but like today it's going to be 70 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, man.
So, the birds kind of freak out for a day or two, but then it's not like they get too confused.
Yeah. 70's kind of chilly for us right now.
Where are you guys out of? I mean, what part of Texas?
Northeast Texas. So we're 80 miles east of Dallas. So not really what you think about as Texas, right? It's a lot more of like big trees, rolling hills, and lakes and creeks and stuff like that. So, kind of really more if you've been through northern Louisiana, it's a lot in Arkansas, a lot more like that.
Ronnie Kitchen's one of the most craziest bull riders I used to run with. Was out of Louisiana, and I every time I meet somebody from Louisiana, I think of that guy, and I hope he's still alive.
That's cool. That's cool, man. Yeah, we live in like a pretty neat cultural area to where, we relate a lot of things back to food. So there's a pretty heavy, Cajun influence. A lot of crawfish, etouffee, gumbo. People cook that stuff around here. And then you've got like of course, the German influence. Just there's a bunch of Germans in Texas, so a lot of stews and meats and stuff like that. And then of course you got the Tex-Mex thing going on. So
the like stockyard beef thing going on not far from here too.
Exactly.
So like that southwestern kind of thing.
So we have a hard time keeping the weight off. I think would be one of the easy things to say. It's just a good place to grow up and eat.
There's not many 109s around here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So you spend a lot of time in that Nebraska country and Kansas and Colorado, New Mexico. Do you feel like you're drawn to hunt in those areas, or kind of what defines you as a hunter in that aspect?
If they have a season open.
And you're a tag holder, that you're defined as a hunter.
I have to tell me, people ask me, what's your favorite hunt? And I'm like, whatever I have a license for at the time. I used to. I cut my teeth on it. A little magazine called Eastman's Hunting Journal. I was their first research editor back in the early 2000s, and it was a really heavy Western influence. And if you left Wyoming, that Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Montana line and headed east, they weren't going to talk about it. And that was true. I knew that stuff west of there, and I understood it. I didn't get in a tree stand until I was 33 years old. So I had never hunted whitetail. But I have now realized that as an outdoorsman, as a sportsman, they're all amazing. It's all a ton of fun. And although I still have my favorite way to do things, there's something special about going from a high physicality hunt to and turn that switch in your brain and get into the mode where patience is king, and you're more likely to have success if you understand wind and stand placement and that chess match that is whitetail hunting. I always say, particularly Western hunts, you just got to be gritty. You just got to be strong. You just got to have perseverance. You don't have to be that smart. It's not that hard. You just have to be in physical shape. Mm-hmm. Whereas as you move to the eastern, Midwest, Eastern type stuff, not that there's not whitetails in the West, but I think it changes. You have to be mentally strong, emotionally strong. I about the first couple years I hunted whitetail, I went crazy. Literally, I went crazy because I can't sit still, and it's so it's a switch, and for me at my age now, I just turned 48. I had to think about that for a second. With 8 knee surgeries in my past and coming off of some hard backcountry hunts, I actually kind of look forward to that little bit of that respite that is for me physically, that is the whitetail season. But then I get into it and I realize emotionally it's just such a high of high and low of lows because it's so tasking mentally. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I totally get it, man. Because that's kind of, I've experienced that somewhat from the reverse. We do a lot of the tree stand hunting, and as of late, my family's been going and hunting elk in the West since the 70s. I haven't been going that long, but elk's kind of a part of what we do. But just here recently have I kind of experienced some of the whitetail on the ground and just some of that more of that stalking style hunting. And it's just, I don't know, it's so cool how it's all hunting, and you're hunting very similar game, but it's such a different activity whenever you are running around chasing down animals as opposed to trying to scheme and connive to just be in the right place at the right time and let one walk by. And it takes completely different skill set. And like you were talking about, it's more mentally that you have to prepare to do one or the other versus, physically, really, in my opinion at least,
I think you hit the nail on the head. One thing I do want to mention is that one is not better than the other, but one, and I'm comparing, just for clarity of the listeners, I'm comparing spotting and stalking versus either ambush or tree stand hunting, blind hunting. In some cases, one way is the only way, or you're just going to blow everything out. I.e., if I'm in Kentucky and I am going to still hunt for white-tailed deer in the Kentucky backcountry, I'm a moron. Because there's no way I can do that. Whereas if I'm in Colorado and there's an aspen thicket and I can still hunt that, totally different. Okay.
Why is that? So explain that a little bit.
Well, it's all about vegetation. It's all about noise. I mean, Adam Wells, who's one of my co-hosts on the show, puts it very succinctly. You can fool their eyes, you can fool their ears, but you can't fool their nose. Mm-hmm. Okay? That is the motto of spot and stalk. That is the motto of any type of hunting, if you really think about it, even stand hunting. But when I'm stand hunting, yeah, it's maybe a little bit of luck, but I'm basing that on knowledge from maybe trail cameras, knowledge from what I've seen myself in the past experience, knowledge from what I see with trails and physical evidence. When I'm spot and stalking, I am looking at the terrain and I'm saying, can I move from point A to point B without being detected and get within bow range? And then, maybe you have a shot with them bedded, or maybe you wait till they stand. Kentucky, I don't know if you guys, and you might have some of this in East Texas, where out west we have like brush, like oak brush and junipers and stuff like that, and they'll grow on the side of a hill. We call it a hill. A lot of people east of the Mississippi would call it a mountain. But in these ridges, and well, you can just work around and sometimes through these patches of oak brush, and it's not fun. But you compare that to Kentucky, where they have autumn olives, or which is kind of like a Russian olive, with big old needles on it, and then you have the briars. And I have a new appreciation for Brer Rabbit. When they talk about the briars, because I didn't grow up with briars. I grew up with mesquite bushes and cactuses. Yeah, they're okay, but you can see those you walk around. Mm-hmm. In Kentucky, you try and move through an area, and it might be open up top, but these briars just get a hold of you. There's no way you could stalk silently through there. I don't care if you wear the bear's feet or the whatever the newest trend of putting something on your dadgum feet to be quiet. They've got these slip-over things, or you take your shoes off, put these moccasins on. You just can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but I have crawled out of a tree stand in Kansas and stalked up on a bedded buck in a plum thicket because I could see my route and I could see my cover.
Yeah.
To be wise, a true and a great hunter, I don't care where they're from or what they do. Some of the best hunters I've been around were whitetail hunters, and they come out west, and it's no different. They're phenomenal western hunters because they're just dang good hunters, right?
Right.
So with spot and stalk, I'm looking and I'm gauging the situation and saying, is this a high percentage play? Okay, we always want to look for high percentage plays, just like in sports. if it's a good buck, I might not want to stalk that buck in that situation, because if I blow him out, especially in western states and on public land, you blow a buck out, he could be 2 canyons away by the time he stops running. Whereas whitetail might be a little bit different because they have a little bit smaller range. But I've seen whitetail get the heck out of Dodge too.
They'll hightail it, man. They'll run too, and it seems like the further west you go, the more willing they are to just get after it and go. I think they just have bigger range.
Well, and the bigger the range, in my humble opinion, is dictated by the amount of cover.
Yeah.
If you go to Missouri and you got these big, large hardwood thickets, actually, it wouldn't be called a thicket, but just big timber areas, right? Yeah. They've got so much cover versus some areas in Kansas where it's the plains, man. Yeah, you're going to have some creek bottoms and stuff that are going to have some trees, and maybe you have some windrows planted by a farmer, at some juncture, whatever. But you're going to see that white-tailed deer is going to hightail it to a long way away because he's getting to his next cover. So I say that to compare and contrast the differences, and just because you're hunting whitetail in the traditional tree stand way doesn't mean that you can't climb out of the stand and take the fight to them. I mean, honestly, I've got out of a turkey blind, and I'm sure you guys have too. In a situation, maybe you have a bar ditch or something, and you drop down in some cover and pop. There's nothing funner than sneaking up on the smartest stupid bird in the world, because you get in and you know where they're going, and it's not towards you, so you get out, you move around them, you don't have to worry about the wind and them smelling you, and then you just wait and they walk by and you shoot them in the head. I mean, that's a lot of fun too.
Dude, it is. I love that kind of thing. I've killed several turkeys in an unorthodox way, I guess you'd say, when something maybe not promoted by the NWTF.
Yeah, not really the purest way, but man, sometimes it's about killing a bird and having something to eat. It's a lot different.
But that's the first time I've ever heard that somebody would frown on you getting out or not calling them in and just going and shooting them. I mean, don't we have a tag in our pocket? Isn't the thing? I mean, my whole goal when I purchase a tag is I'm purchasing a tag for an adventure. Now, I want that adventure. If I kill something or not, that does not diminish from the adventure. We've put ourselves. I'm gonna get on my soapbox just for a second here, guys.
Let's go.
Okay. Let me get my step ladder to get up on the soapbox.
on your box, you're kind of the same height as us once you get on it. So
yeah, there you go. Let me look you in the eye. So when I talk about television, hunting television, we have done a tremendous disservice to the industry, to the sport we love, to the heritage we love, because we have started to put boxes around what we should and shouldn't do. Oh, you shouldn't shoot a bedded animal. Well, hold on. If I have a stick and string in my hand and I am stealthy enough to get into an area where I have a clean shot on a bedded animal, and I get it all the time online. You'll see one of the shows I think I sent you, Too Close for Comfort 2.0.
Yeah, I noticed that in that show.
Yep.
Dave Bronio shot the buck at the end at 9 yards bedded. Amazing. Now, we had 40-mile-per-hour winds. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because mule deer's, one of their main defenses is hearing. But you don't have to worry about the wind. And he gets up there, and boom. That animal couldn't have ducked the string, could he? Because he was laying down. That animal is totally unaware. You have the opportunity to make a cleaner, more quick kill. And we got so much flack when people saw that. Of course, we get flack. We're always going to get haters. That's
Sure.
just part of.
If you film your
as
stuff,
grow
it's
and-
just flag is
Yeah.
a part of it, man.
Yep.
But like this idea of the television industry creating or popularizing hunting, and then all of a sudden now we get, you got your base camp of guys that only want to bugle bulls in. You got your base camp of guys that only want to, call a turkey in. That's the only pure way to do it. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing we've done poorly is we've given them an idea that if you go to Kansas, let's say for example, and you crawl up a tree, 180-inch buck's going to walk by.
Right.
That's not true.
No,
now,
it's not.
it does happen. You will kill big deer and big elk where there are big deer and big elk. These guys that go and say, I want a 70-inch buck in, outside of Ozona, Texas, okay? And you might be holding out for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
Because it's just the genetics aren't there. So, but we've portrayed ourselves as a hunter. If you're a good hunter, you're going to go and you're going to crawl up this tree, and this huge buck's going to walk by. Same thing out west. I grew up, cut my teeth on a VHS, which for you guys, VHS used to be a tape.
Yeah.
You used to put, okay,
Yeah, I grew up with those.
Dude, I had Whistling Wings, man, on DVD, man, or on
All right,
VHS.
Well, I have a stack of Primos the Truth elk series, right?
Yeah.
Those
1,
are
2,
killer.
3, all those. Okay, every
Yeah.
year I'd get it, and I would wear that sucker out. But that painted a picture is you go out. Now I come to find out later on was the places they're hunting are these amazing properties that do have a ton of elk, and you can get away with a lot of different stuff. But we portray, hey, if you come out west and you squeeze a hoochie mama, then the next thing you know, a big old bull's going to come running, and that's just not reality.
Right.
I mean, so there's been times I've snuck in on bulls and shot bulls and never made a peep, but then there has been other times when I have called bulls in, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
It's like calling in a turkey, and shooting them in the face at 2 yards. It's kind of fun.
Trevon, if there was 8 quail sitting on the ground at 20 yards, I'm putting a shotgun shell downrange real quick before they jump up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm in the same boat as you, man. Quail are one of the tastiest things that run around out there. So I'm not gonna let them jump up so I can shoot 1 or 2. Whereas I could shoot.
And I don't want to knock the guy who has the opportunity in an area.
Sure, yeah.
Where, they've got tons of opportunities, and so they're holding to a standard where I'm not going to shoot that quail till he flushes. That's fine. That's great, especially if they have dogs, because there's something really magical about working behind a good dog.
Yeah.
But I think if I were to tell you now, after you've shared that with me and said, well, you shouldn't do that, who am I, unless it's illegal
Yep.
or unsafe, who am I to tell you and manage your ethics? I got to
right.
be really careful.
That's right, man. I mean, we live in a what people call a bait state. We like to call it, feed or corn feeders. Like we have corn feeders around every corner where we live right here. And,
Right.
in my opinion, it's a pretty ethical shot when you shoot a doe at a feeder that's eating, as opposed to trying to stop one on a trail in a small hole in the brush and make a shot at it after you've grunted at it and got it, 0 to 100. So
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a lease down by Sanderson, Texas, in the Big Bend country, and if you didn't run a bait station, you wouldn't see a deer.
that's right, dude.
exactly.
We're in the same boat.
It's the same. Saskatchewan, if you're going bear hunting in the spring in Saskatchewan, and especially in some of that, where you go past Saskatoon 12 hours on a dirt road, you're not going to frickin' see a black bear unless you have a bait station. Now, with that being said, I think people also need to realize that take Kansas, for example, that's a baiting state where you can bait. I put corn out in areas, and I'm putting corn out in areas to maintain a travel corridor mainly.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is they've got plenty of feed. It's not an area where, you're really also helping to feed the deer population. I'm doing it more for the does to get in a pattern. So then a big mature buck, very rarely in daylight, is going to just walk out and start feeding on the corn.
Right.
It just doesn't. But what they're going to do is they're going to come through that area and check the corn for scent.
Right.
And then they're going to move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same thing as guys putting out scent, or drags or anything like that. So if we start opening that can of worms for dictating what we should and shouldn't do, as long as it's within the laws. Now, in Colorado, you can't bait. So what are you doing? Well, just like in the Rocky Mountains, when I'm hunting elk or whatever, I'm trying to get between where they're feeding and where they're bedding. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I know it's going to put me in a situation. And I have hunted elk in a tree stand above water. What's the difference between water or some type of feed?
Yeah, it's a necessity.
I mean, it is. Yeah, you got the four things that dictate, especially out west, that dictate whether or not you're going to have success finding animals. One is for prime forage, okay? Two is cover, either thermal cover or cover for safeties, things like that. Three is basically you got human pressure or pressure in general. Mm-hmm. That could be other hunters. Or in like a state like Idaho, that could be wolves. Mm-hmm. Wolves can be your pressure. That's going to dictate that. And so you got food, you got water, you got pressure, you got cover. Those four items. In New Mexico, if you're hunting that earlier bow season for elk in Unit 16A, 15, the Gila area, and it's a dry year, water holes are huge because water are like water for elk is like water for cattle. They got to water once a day. Mm-hmm. And where in Colorado it's not as much a limiting factor because of the fact that you're dealing with there's a creek or a spring in almost every drainage. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're sitting on water, you might have something come in. But down in the South Texas, it's similar too. I mean, we would set tree stands up on water also because water was so important.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of talked about how to be opportunistic, in which we've been kind of discussing. Sometimes you may jump out of a deer stand if you can see a path to stalk a deer. But in general. I know that you've done a lot of different hunts. Are you ever looking at an opportunity to go on that hunt because you want to stalk, or are you just knowing this is an area that I would like to go, and it may be an area that is stalking, and how do you determine that on a big level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I don't go out to any hunt thinking one style is the way I'm going to go. Let me use an example. If you watch that Too Close for Comfort 2.0 film that I sent you. So we're sitting there. When I'm looking at a map and I'm looking at a new area, the first thing I'm looking for is glassing points. People come out west and they realize it's going to be more of a physical hunt and this and that. And what they end up doing is they spend more time taking their bow for a walk than they do finding animals. Mm-hmm. So what I try and tell people is, look, don't go in and just think, oh, this looks elky, I'm going to go walk out and see if I can find some elk, because it doesn't work that way. Or especially mule deer. You need to find them. You need to bed them, or you need to have a pretty good idea of where they're at, and then you'll make your plan. And I say that because in that film, we had an opportunity. I had actually missed a deer, a shot into a cut bank that I didn't realize kind of went out at the bottom when the buck stood up, and I felt like an idiot. But
Dave got you back on that too. That's pretty good.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. But when I went that evening, there was an ag field with some round bales. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? Because normally you're not going to spot and stalk moving animals. That's very hard. Mm-hmm. Because when animals are up, they're higher, first of all. They're moving. They're very alert. An animal beds in an area they feel safe. So they're not moving. They don't have the height advantage of being standing. So there's a lot of things that kind of kick back to give us a little advantage. But when they're moving, so I share that because in the afternoons, if we don't have something bedded or they're already getting up to go move towards their feeding area, we're better off being in an ambush point and staying. Why? Because we're going to blow more deer out moving through the country that perhaps we didn't see 2 ridges over. They see us, they're gone. And if we would have just sat, they'd have walked, towards us. So we don't know what we're going to do. I've already screwed up the shot for the day. So we move out, and I get in between these 2 hay bales. That's my blind. I mean, we don't cut any branches basically we just tuck into the blind and see what happens. And as you watched it, we're sitting there, and which we had never seen a whitetail buck out there, but a good whitetail buck walks out, and I shot it at 35 yards.
Dude, such a beautiful just footage and scenery there, and big deer, man. It was awesome. I love that part of the video.
Well, I think what that shows you is you have to be flexible.
Sure.
I love getting my Daniel Boone on, man, dude. I love, sneaking up on there and being able to see the tine sticking up over the grass or, behind the bush or whatever. I love that. It's awesome because you are on their level. You're taking the fight to them. But if the situation doesn't call for that, there's times that I've got to within a certain distance, and I know these deer are going to come out, and they're going to actually come right down the draw when they come out and put themselves in bow range. Then I might set up there. So I've spotted them. I've stalked within X number of yards, and then it turns into an ambush hunt. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I'm a better hunter because I get within range. You guys could do the exact same thing. Now, you might realize that in this situation, I would say, nope, it's not worth it because of this, this, and this. And you guys might have pushed that luck and learned that same lesson that I learned because I made that mistake. You might learn it. But pretty soon, you're going to pick up on this is a high percentage stock. This is a low percentage stock. And you're gonna get that feel, that sense of when do I move. I think another thing that people don't understand is animal behavior. Mm-hmm. Understanding when deer are alerted, when deer are or elk, any animal, and being able to read that body language. There's times that deer are in plain sight of me. And I use Montana decoys all the time, as you guys have seen. And there's times I will literally go straight at them. I'm just reading their body language. And the moment they look like, this ain't right, then I'll stop, or I'll change course. But a lot of times, as I'm reading their body language, I can get within bow range just using a decoy. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about a decoy in a breeding sense, but just a decoy in just using a decoy for cover.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think you have to not be afraid to fail. Same thing with when you're turkey hunting and you take a fan or Montana decoy has what they call a Wily Tom, and you go straight at the bird, and all of a sudden the bird comes to you. Well, you're doing a mix of decoying them in, of spot and stalk, of maybe you're calling to, as you're moving in, and I just think a lot of it has to do with what's the animal behavior, how are you reading that, and then how do you get into bow range to make a good shot. So, I think everything changes. It is a lot of fun to be able to spot the classic spotting a deer.
Oh, yeah.
He beds in some cliffs, let's say. There's nothing better than rocky terrain where you can get the wind right and you turn around and, you might have to make a mile loop around another ridge, and then the next thing you know, you're right on top of them and they have no idea you're there. That is stinking awesome.
I did that last year, and I was probably emotionally unprepared for that whole, oh my gosh, there he is at 16 yards. It was the first time I'd ever done something like that, and I made that mile loop you talked about, and you come around and I just not knowing what I'm doing pretty much. I've stalked animals or whatever, but I've always maintained that sight picture or seen them, the whole time. But then like just kind of having that feeling of knowing he's there and then going up and trying to find him. And then it's like all of a sudden you're way too close, or not too close, but like at least emotionally you're too close. But
and that's when a buddy is really good because there's something special about having somebody watching that animal, and then being able to communicate with you via hand signals, or if it's legal on a two-way radio or texting or whatever. I mean, again, now we get into that's not ethical.
Yeah,
and whatever. But if it's legal, like in Nebraska, you can actually use two-way radios as long as you're not in a moving vehicle or not in a vehicle at all.
Really?
And so you have to check your regs. But what we'll do is, of course, we've left the vehicles and we've hiked out to these quote-unquote glassing points that we know about, and we're finding deer. But then once we do, we as a team sneak in, we get a camera set up on that deer bedded, and then we have the ability to have the hunter and another cameraman for us, because we film everything, sneak around, and then it's just that peace of mind when you lose sight of the animal that you're going after, knowing that he's still there, and knowing that you can take your time and relax, and because a mule deer, they're funny. A mule deer will bed down, let's say at 9 o'clock. That mule deer is not in his day bed. He's going to bed down for an hour or so, and then he's going to get up and he's going to feed, and then he's going to bed down again, and that's his day bed. So it's very important that you don't move in too fast, okay? Because you want him to be in a situation where if he chooses to get up and he feeds down that bottom and around the corner, now all of a sudden, because of your approach, he catches your wind, right? So it's very important that you allow the animal to put himself in a position where, again, it ups that percentage. And sometimes they'll stand up, they'll feed a little bit and bed right back down, 5 yards from where they bedded the first time. But sometimes I've seen them go 200 yards and then bed back down, and then they're there for the day.
Gotcha.
So I think understanding the animal behavior is very important. I think sometimes you have to be aggressive, though. Some people are ultra aggressive, which is not a good thing, because patience is a virtue. Sometimes people are too passive, and they're like, I'm not sure. I just don't know. Well, get off the fence, dude. You're either here to hunt or you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not going to kill them from here.
Yeah.
So I think there's a point where you have to risk making a mistake, because you know what it is. What's your heart doing when you're at that buck at 16 yards? It is pounding in your ears.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you do it more and more, you get more and more relaxed, and you kind of expect to get to that point, and then you just have to make the shot.
Yeah.
But that comes with experience and time.
Yeah.
It's the same reason you want the ball in Michael Jordan's hands with 10 seconds left. You know?
Yeah. I have something that I kind of just want to bolster one of your points, and then I have a question, kind of a big question for you. I think the animal behavior thing that you keep kind of coming back to is a huge deal, and obviously the majority of people live in the city, and even a lot of hunters live in cities where you don't have a ton of wildlife contact every day. But I feel like that animal behavior. So, for instance, if you're stalking a mule deer, or for an example personally, if I was stalking a whitetail, which we did a few times last year, back when I was 10 years old, stalking ducks, I'm sure I'm using things that I've picked up along the way, stalking other animals and observing other animals and how they behave, and especially deer. But just being able to see deer and pass deer, whether they're does or whatever, over the years, seeing how they react to each other and to things that may be coming, a deer that may all of a sudden peek up over the hill 100 yards away. I think that kind of stuff is really important. So I would kind of, just emphasize that, and KC's really good at this, but just be observant in your daily routine. You know what I mean? Don't don't get in that grind, nose to the grindstone of business and work and everything else, and not pay attention when a squirrel runs across the road in front of you to how it actually acts, and what it's doing.
Look at your dog.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, you sneak up on your dog. Look at the dog, his behavior, even though he knows you and you're not a threat. Look at that dog and the way that dog responds when he's lazily laying there in the sun, and then the difference when somebody drives up. His head pops up, his ears go up, he looks, then he stands, then he runs to investigate.
Yep.
I mean, you see all of these traits. Well, animals do the same thing. Turkeys do the same thing. What happens when a turkey is alarmed? You hear the dreaded putt, right? A doe catches your wind, and what happens? She snorts, she stamps. These are all signals. But when an animal is relaxed, and even when they see something, like let's say a buck is feeding, and he picks his head up, his ears go forward, and then he puts his head back down, his ears drop, and he goes back to feeding. Was he alert? Well, he was checking something out. And sometimes I just think it's ingrained in their psyche, in their genes. I don't know, whatever. Their self-awareness that, I mean, they just do that occasionally just to give a scan. Just to, it's like I was a police officer, and one of the things that they always talked about was tunnel vision. You didn't want to be locked in and have tunnel vision. You are always scanning. Why? Because a threat can come from anywhere. Well, same thing with them. I mean,
Sure, yeah.
It's in the West. You got mountain lions, you got bears, you got people, you got wolves, there's a lot of things that can cause a threat to the animals. So I think body language on animals in general is you don't have to be a lifelong Western spot and stalk hunter to understand animal behavior.
Yep, exactly.
So don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. I tell people, just see, look at their body language, have the wherewithal to concentrate. What are they doing? Oh, okay, this is not a good time for me to move because they're looking right in my direction. They might not be looking at you, but they're looking right in your direction. You wait for them to put their head down. Wait for them to shake the flies off their head, whatever it might be.
Right. So, with that said, with their wherewithal that these animals have and their ability to see danger or to sense danger in one way or another, how are you? I mean, give us some details on how you're locating an animal, a target animal for one. Especially if you're looking for that 3, 4, 5-year-old buck, and in an area like Nebraska where you guys have been, maybe it's wide open for miles and miles. How do you how do you locate an animal? So, in other words, see it before and without it seeing you.
That's a great question, and I think the bottom line is buy the best optics you can afford.
Yeah. Okay.
I again, going back to my point of people coming out west and taking their bow for a walk, don't put the miles on your boots. Put the miles on your eyeballs. Okay. Get the glass, and I can go into that. I mean, I carry 10x40s on my chest. I have 15s. Bino in my pack, and then I have a spotting scope. So what I start out with is when I get to my glassing point, I pop out my tripod. First thing I do is I take my 10x40s and I'm scanning, and I'm looking for animals in any place where they would be easy to spot. Okay, and especially if it's at first light. You're going to have animals moving. That's huge help. It's much easier to see an animal that's moving than it is an animal that is bedded.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? But after I haven't found something, or maybe there's some does there. Well, then I'll pop my 15s onto my tripod, and I'll start really picking stuff apart. So as I pick that apart, what I'm looking for is, again, animals. I'm looking for easy opening, stuff like that. Then I'll go back and then I start gridding stuff out where I'm looking for parts of animals. I'm literally looking for the glint of an antler if the sun's rising. I'm looking for a flick of an ear.
Do you look for those
I'm looking for
individually? Like, do you scan a landscape and looking in particular with focus towards an antler, and then come back and scan the whole landscape again, looking for an ear, or are you just being observant about it all?
I've already done the basic scan with my 10x40s.
Okay.
If something was there, it would have jumped out at me. As I'm going through, I'm now looking. You can do some different things. Some people grid. Some people go on a horizontal line and they work through. I tend to work left to right in what I can see, and I'll pick an area and I'm gonna look at. Let's say you have a draw coming out, and I've got a little bit of vegetation and some brush and maybe some junipers or whatever. Right, I'm gonna start looking through that. I'm gonna start picking apart those clumps, and I'm looking for. And this time I'm looking, of course, if an animal is there or steps out, I'm going to see it because of the movement. But I'm also looking for the bits and pieces at that time. And then when I find something, then to reassure or to really study, that's when I'll pull out my spotting scope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which of those do you actually, because I hear that a lot, and I use it to some extent too, like, the flicker of an ear, a tail, a leg, or whatever. But which of those actually usually gives the deer away?
Antlers.
Yeah.
An antler because that associates with movement.
Mm-hmm.
A flicker of an ear can do anything with movement has. But think about it: if you're to that point where they've already bedded down, you're not going to get the movement you would if they were walking, feeding through an area.
Yeah.
But what you will get is a turn of the head.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the antlers are also going to stick up higher. So in some situations, they're bedded, and all you can see is their antler.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's been many a time I've seen a stick move, and it wasn't a stick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've literally already looked over that area, and I come back and I see a stick move, and I'm like, what? That's when I pull out the spotting scope, throw that on there, and sure enough, that's a dadgum antler.
And honestly, I feel like that's a chink in the armor of deer. Like in the spotting that I've done, even mature bucks kind of ignore the fact that they have these big things sticking off the top of their head, and they'll be completely concealed, but those antlers won't be. And, it doesn't matter if it's like a cut milo field or a plum thicket or whatever. Like those things, it's like they forget that sticks up above the cover, and that gives them away a decent amount. I haven't done it as much as you, but I would agree with you. Like antlers, far and away, are what I usually spot when I see something.
Right. Well, and you speak of a milo field in eastern Colorado. We killed a good buck one year, and we knew he was in there because we'd put up a trail camera on a windmill, and the buck was coming to water at night, so we knew this good buck was in there, and we literally were scanning a milo field, and all you could see was his antlers. And it's the only reason. We ended up, circling around, getting the wind right, and 4 of us snuck in there and got cameras set up and decoys set up. And then when he stood up, the shooter was 25 yards, and I was actually filming at this juncture because I'd already we kind of go in turns, and it wasn't my turn, right? But what we did is I just popped the decoy up. I had my camera set up on the tripod right on where he was at, but then I popped the decoy up, and we ended up having someone go around the other side with a doe decoy, and that's what finally got him to stand. He stood up, looked at that doe decoy, looked back at my buck decoy. Well, all in this same time, my buddy's coming to full draw because his attention's totally on us. So you're right. I don't know if it's a chink in the armor or just the fact that they still have to scan. If they're trying to make their antlers disappear, their head's going to be on the ground.
Yeah.
And that is a very vulnerable position because the predators they're dealing with don't deal with sight as much as scent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they're using, and of course, let's say a coyote or a wolf or something like that, they're going to come downwind, which their sense of smell isn't going to help them from that predator. So they've got to have their eyes where they can see. So, I mean, it is definitely, I would say this is where patience comes out and the ability to say, okay, I don't see anything, let's move. You might move 150 yards down the ridge to a different vantage point, and all of a sudden now there's more deer. And then, especially with bedded deer, I think people don't talk enough about this, but when you find one deer, that's when you really need to pick apart, especially in places that's got a lot of cut banks and a lot of small draws like Nebraska, western Nebraska. You need to find those other deer. I don't know how many times I've been stalking in on one buck, and it turns out there's 4 bucks in there with him.
Mm-hmm. So how do you, when you go to pick up and move, and you feel like you've exhausted your eyes on that area, how are you doing that without blowing the country out when it's in real open country?
Yeah, it's a risky run. I mean, you move through the country really quietly and smartly. I mean, I put it this way: you always expect to find a deer in the next draw. So if I have to cross a draw to go up on another ridge, before I cross that draw, I'm gonna, as I ease up, I'm gonna just get my eye line, so I'm scanning and looking. Maybe I'll glass a couple of spots where I could expect to see an animal. And then I kind of still hunt my way to the next glassing point. Have you ever, and I've done it time and time again, where you're so focused on glassing 500, 600, 800 yards away, and then when you're done, you look up and there's a freaking deer standing there looking at you at 80 yards.
Yeah, or in bow range. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that happens. You have to do the scan first. I was hunting deer in Colorado, and we were leaning up on the pickup truck tires, glassing this ridge about 600 yards away. Okay, and I'm looking for these deer, and I'm seeing a couple does, but I'm looking for this big buck I know is in there, and I look around my tripod, and he's standing there at 45 yards, and he starts walking towards me.
Ooh.
Now, in that situation, it was a rifle hunt, but I had my bow. But my bow wasn't sitting right next to me.
Oh no!
It was in the back of the truck.
Oh no!
Yeah, and I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me! A 200-inch deer walking up. He's within range. If I would have had my bow, I could have picked my bow up, put an arrow on, and shot him right there. Instead, I ended up, and I don't know if you've ever tried to work a zipper or
you can't.
fine motor skills.
Yeah.
When a 200-inch buck is within bow range. I couldn't get my zipper on my case open. Then I couldn't get my quiver on my bow, so I just jerked an arrow out of my bow and then realized I didn't have my release on. Oof. I dropped my release 3 times. Well, I still came to full draw at this buck at 50 yards, but by then he'd worked around and he was actually heading towards a private property fence, and I knew if I shot him, he was going to take 3 bounds and jump that fence. And I did not shoot him. Because in this area, I knew I couldn't access that private land. Heck, he could have jumped the fence and died right there. And they wouldn't have let me cross the fence.
Man, so
I didn't shoot him.
Yeah.
That's rough.
That's tough. So when you've located an animal, what are the next steps? I mean, when you've got that, you see that buck's horns and sticking up above the sage or whatever it might be, what are the next steps? I mean, I guess you can probably leave out, setting up another camera or whatever, for the general guy that doesn't video his.
Well, I would say this. I'd get some coffee out, maybe have a snack.
There you go.
The worst thing you could do is say, oh, there he is. Let's go after him.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing in the world.
That's a good point.
The hardest thing, and there's a couple reasons that I've learned over the years that this is helpful. He's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay, unless you're close and you're running the risk of blowing him out just by sitting there. You need to have a snack. You need to chillax. You need to relax. You need to, keep eyes on him. Mm-hmm. Because if it's 8:30 and he's bedded, there's no way I'm making a move right there.
Yeah.
Because, and again, I'm honing in on specifics for mule deer. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it might be different for different animals, but I'm going to verify my high percentage play. And that means probably throwing my spotting scope on there and picking apart everywhere around him. What other deer are there? I might even back up, get out of his line of sight, move around to a different vantage point where I can see the area around him better. But I am not planning on making a stalk on that buck until I'm sure he's there for the day. Okay?
Okay.
So Once I do that, let's say you have a buddy. We're not filming, but you do have a buddy. You put your buddy up in that great vantage point where he can see a lot of country and all of that stuff, and he watches. You're going to figure out which way the wind is. Use that to your advantage. I will say this. I used to hate hunting in high winds. I used to hate it when it was 25, 30 mile per hour winds. Hated it. I freaking love it now, hunting mule deer over the past 10 years, because I learned I can get away with so much more. Dave, on the film we were talking about, I'm convinced he could have walked up and grabbed that antler of that buck. I am.
That's awesome.
Because he had the advantage of the wind, and the buck had his head down and was literally asleep.
Yeah.
So once you get into that position, you start to close. When you're closing, of course, you're going to landmark. The first thing you're doing is you're looking at landmarks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's say you don't have any type of communication other than hand signals. You landmark it, and then you determine a signaling system with your buddy. Now, again, your buddy is well out of range of blowing this buck. The last thing you want is, because your buddy's giving you hand signals, he blows the buck out of there. So you have to have some common sense there. I'm going to let you guys take that. We won't go too far into that.
Hey,
and for us...
Can we dive a little bit into the hand signal thing in particular? I don't want you to tell me your specific...
I'm going to.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about
I
that.
will. I'll tell you exactly what I use.
Okay.
But one thing for us, we'll get even to within 300-400 yards because we have a big lens.
Yeah.
And we feel pretty secure about that. So you can even move a little bit closer with your buddy, and then have your buddy behind or a little offset of a bush where he's got his binoculars set up, and you'd be able to see him, and he'd still have some cover from that buck.
Right.
Now, hand signals.
Yes.
Once you get to within 100, maybe 80 yards, whatever, and now maybe you're going to have to drop to your hands and knees, okay? It's always good to have that secure. Is he still there? So your buddy's looking at you through his binoculars. You make the hands out kind of like, well, what do you think type of signal, just kind of like, and if the buck has moved, this is going to sound silly, but if the buck has moved, then your buddy will go like no, like hands going back and forth. I'm doing the motion. You can't see me because this is audio, but I'm like no, it's not going to work.
Like the field goal was no good. Is that kind of
exactly
okay.
Perfect? Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I borrow that?
You got it. You got it.
The field goal was no good. He walked away. So now I'm doing the arms like I'm walking away, and then you point in the direction he went.
Okay.
Okay?
Gotcha.
So what other signal would you need at that point? Maybe he's still there. You put a big round over your head, put your hands above your head and make a circle.
Okay.
And that's okay.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
Okay. And then if he's sleeping, you do the old two hands and you put your hands on your, like to the side. Right?
Tyler did that to me this last year, and
He
I
had
had
no
no clue what was going on because we hadn't
So that
discussed
means-
that yet.
Right, exactly. Without communication, you're lost. So those are the signals we use.
Yeah.
Now, it gets more in depth, and you'll have to figure this out. But what if your buddy says you need to go around? If he's moved and repositioned, how do you communicate that? That's hard.
Yeah, that's tough.
So, but the primary signals is, hey, dummy, you blew him out. He's gone. Okay, we know how to. Or everything's okay. He's still bedded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What that does for you, maybe Casey, maybe you're the stalker. Maybe you're the person that's going out there. That gives you the peace of mind. Okay, I can slow down. Mm-hmm. He's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. You have to have the confidence that unless you blow that buck out, he's not going anywhere. That little bit of confidence will slow you down. I don't know how many times Adam and Dave, Adam Wells and Dave Baronio, of course, who have helped host the show, and Lane Walter is now helping host the show. These are guys that are just hardcore hunters that are friends of mine that we've hunted together for years. But I can't tell you how many times they've turned and looked at me and said, "Slow down, dude. Freaking slow down," because I'm so excited. I got a lot of energy anyway, but I'm so excited. I'm like, I got to get there. I got to get there right now. Well, the faster you go, the louder you are, and and then you move. All you need is 10 seconds to make the shot. Right? It's all you need. You just need that magical 10 seconds. But if he's not there when you get there, you'll never have that 10 seconds. So you have to, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, so what if you haven't landmarked the deer perfectly, or you're coming in the wrong spot or whatever? That's the issue I ran into last year. Like I knew, like, in a 1/8 of an acre area of where this deer was, but I couldn't see him at all on the approach until I got to 16 yards. Right, I could see the tips of his antlers. So
yeah, you didn't landmark very good.
Well, there wasn't any landmarks. That was kind of the
issue. That is true.
Yeah.
If you're in a bunch of nondescript trees or cover like that you do make a good point. That is tough.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, I know he's in that clump of trees. Well, if that clump of trees is 80 yards by 50 yards, well, that's tough. Now, what we're talking about is we can literally see this deer. Okay? And if your buddy on the glasses can see the deer, now you're in a situation, I know he's in this area, then you need to be able to communicate somehow. Or I have also seen, guys, I'll be honest, there's a time when you quit communicating and just freaking hunt.
Yeah.
When you get into that zone, you're like, okay, I'm just going to hunt. And that means, let's say you're on your hands and knees and you take 2 little crawls and you take your binos and you come up very slowly and you raise up on your knees and you glass very slowly. And it takes you an hour to move 20 yards.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any other hand signals that you would need, maybe? Or does that cover most of what you encounter?
Yeah, I mean, that covers most of what you encounter. I mean, that's when it's nice where you have a radio, a earbud in your ear, and the guy can say, okay, he is, do you see the green, do you see the tree that has the broken branch hanging down? Yes, I see that. Okay. And how do you communicate that with hand signals? That's just really tough. And it's also hard if you say, well, I'm going to tell him how many yards he's at. Well, that's ridiculous because when you're looking through glasses, especially 400 or 500 yards away, he might look like he's freaking 10 yards from the deer when he's actually 50 yards from the deer. So it's hard to communicate, you are 50 yards from the deer. Well, the best thing you can say is, okay, if you're in a state that you can't elect digitally or radio or communicate that way, you have to be able to give some direction. I haven't come up with a good close range system other than stop what you're doing, back out, which that's pretty simple. Stop sign, right? You hold your hand up, stop. And then you back away, and then get in a situation where you can say, okay, you need to come from a different area. There's been times where we've backed out. I've come all the way back to my camera guy, and he's like, "Dude, you were fine, but you've got to get up above that next ledge." Or he's gonna, or your bino guy, your glassing guy, your direction giver, he's seeing something, and you're like, dude, I can't go there. If I go there, I'm gonna be in plain sight of him. I have to go this way, and that's when you just say, I'm gonna hunt.
Right, right.
I know what I can see. I can see the buck. I have to go this way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, like last 100 yards, because I feel like all this is stalking, right?
First, can we talk about, like, when you're creating a plan, a deer usually, like you said earlier, is looking downwind. So how do you, but there a lot of times it's not straight downwind. So like, how do you put this plan together of I'm going to not be seen from his very wide angle of view, and I'm also not going to be smelled? I mean, is it not always possible?
You can fool his eyes, you can fool his ears, you can't fool his nose. So everything's based on the wind. I don't care where he's looking. Now, if I can get to a situation where I can have thicker cover, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use my head, right? I'm common sense.
Okay.
But what happens if he does, which they do all the time, they're in their day bed, they stand up, they switch ends, and they bed right back down. Now, all of a sudden, he's facing the opposite way. Okay? But his nose is only going to pick up the scent that's coming from the wind. Mm-hmm. So you can't get caught up as much on sight as you can on, and that's why I carry a decoy. If he's looking right at me and I'm reading his body language that he's thinking something's not right, I'm popping a decoy up. Even if I stick it in the ground and move around a different angle, if I'm within range, I'm using that freaking decoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I run out of cover, I'm using that decoy. Or I get into range, I can't move anymore. Now my buddy, who was a glasser, is now my decoyer. And he's going to go where he's not winded, of course, but he's going to go in a position where he can run that decoy like it's a deer, la 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 la, right? And all of a sudden, I'm just a deer, and it helps if you say that under your breath too when you're walking, and you just go up there. And then you'll find what's crazy, and this is where we first learned our confidence in the decoys as an effective weapon of going right at them, is we were using them as a distraction in order to get deer to either A, stand so we had a shot, or B, literally just relax. Mm-hmm. We would get, the guy with the decoy would be within freaking bow range.
Yeah.
And the deer wouldn't stand. On Too Close for Comfort, the very first film, Dave misses a buck at 10 yards. Okay, he's in this little depression. I go, and for that's an exaggeration, probably 20 minutes, I'm 40 yards from that buck going back and forth like the old carnival frickin' duck in the shooting. Beep, 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 back and forth. And the buck just looks at me, never stinking stood up. You know how I finally got him to stand up? Is I said, screw it, I'm going to act like I'm going to walk away, like I don't care about him. And I took that deer like I was walking away and went around the edge. The moment I went around the bottom of that ridge and disappeared out of sight, he stood up to see where I went.
Huh.
Man, and he was just that aggressive and was concerned with that
Dave
other
was
deer.
at 10 yards the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay? Watch that Too Close for Comfort, that first one.
Yeah.
Okay. At the time, I was shooting a stick bow, and he missed the deer, and it's quite a funny conversation because, well, you saw if you watched 2.0, we talked about that.
Yeah, I watched the first one too. You gave him a real hard time.
Yeah. Dude, I was mad. I'll be honest. I was mad because he has a friggin' compound bow. He's a good shot, and he screws that up. Should be no reason why he didn't kill that deer. Anyway, he didn't, and he's a moron.
Hey,
So in that last 100 yards, and there's a point where, again, we're weighing, am I being too aggressive? Am I in a situation where you have a plethora of opportunities, you can be a little more aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm not a trophy hunter. I'll be honest. I'm a horrible, horrible trophy hunter. I just want a respectable animal of that species. I want to try and kill a 4-year-old or older if I can. But I'm an equal opportunity archer. And so he doesn't have to be 180 inches for me to let the air out of him. I honestly, I just want that close proximity and that excitement. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to take that meat and I'm going to feed my family. I give a lot to my church. So there's a lot of upside to not just the adventure, but the harvesting of that animal in a conservation aspect. But for me, it's all about that time. That moment in time when it's your wits against that buck's. And so you did ask about the last 100. Did I answer your question? I guess.
Yes, yeah, that's pretty good, okay. Man. I appreciate it.
The last 100 yards.
Yeah.
If you think you're going too fast, you are. If you think you're not going slow enough, you aren't. Go slower. That's my last 100 yards. Slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down. Okay?
So, are you
hardest thing to do?
Are you shedding gear and trying to go light that last 100 yards and just making it just what you need to kill the animal, or are you?
Yeah. Depending upon the terrain, boots are coming off. Maybe not 100, but the last 50 for sure.
Yeah.
Boots are coming off. Now, if I have a 20 mile per hour wind, I don't care. Mm-hmm. I might have my flip flops on. I might. Who knows? I mean, it doesn't matter when you have that type of wind cover. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I do like to take my backpack off, and the reason I'll take my backpack off at about 100 yards is because it's more comfortable. Mm-hmm. I can actually be quieter. There's times I have to lay there for hours, literally hours, and it's just more comfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I wouldn't, because then I'm like, man, I could sure use a drink of water right now.
Yeah.
And if you can't hang, I just put another chew in and I'm good to go.
Yeah. So are you on that kind of deal? You talked about comfort. Do you use like knee pads and stuff like that whenever you're getting tight like that?
I do, especially with my bad left knee. I've had 8 knee surgeries, and so I get very uncomfortable sitting. I can't even kneel and sit. You know how people sit on their heels?
Yeah.
Kneeling. I can't even do that. My leg won't bend that far.
Ooh.
So yes, that's very important. I either have. I went to Lowe's and bought like tiling knee pads.
Mm-hmm.
Like like good knee pads. You got to be careful because some of those are pretty loud.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're dealing with rocks and stuff like that. So you got to get the right kind. But we use Sitka gear, and they do have a knee pad in their pants, and some of their different variety of pants. But in that situation where I have that knee pad, I'll also take a softer, like a volleyball knee pad, and I'll put it underneath, just because of my bad knees, and so
Gotcha.
that's for sure. I'll even, depending on the country, I might even have gloves on, but I don't shoot in gloves, so normally I'm shedding those gloves by the time I'm 100 yards out anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's no good answer for that, man, because honestly, especially you start getting out west, like whenever it's hunting season and it's windy, it's usually cold as all get out, and you gotta keep your fingers warm enough to function. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to complete your task when you get there. But I'm like you, I have to have just open hand,
Me
right?
too.
I can't shoot with a glove on, and there's just no answer to functioning with a release and having a glove on and keeping your fingers warm without that. I don't know what the answer is.
When I went to the muskox hunting, it was 5 degrees to minus 30. And I actually got frostbite on my thumb because of the fact that on my stock, it was like a 2-hour stock. And, the steel of my release touching my thumb, I ended up getting frostbite on my thumb. Mm. And it was a unique because I couldn't wear gloves, right? Mm-hmm. So the time I really needed, but then what I would do is I kept switching hands, and I'd put one hand in my pocket, right? And then I'd hold my bow with the other and switch it back and forth. But the constant touching of that metal to my thumb, I think, is what ended up. But it's neither here nor there. I mean, What do? You didn't come out there to be comfortable. I don't go hunting to be comfortable. I go hunting to have an adventure and to push myself.
Yeah.
And all that is, I'm not tough. I'm not the best shot. I'm not the best hunter. It's a switch in your mind, and we all have it. If you were an athlete, that's where you just go, man, this hurts, but I don't care.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that switch you have to make, and that's the difference between the 10%ers. There's 10% of hunters that kill 90% of the game. Mm-hmm. Why is that? They flip that switch and they do what needs to be done consistently to get it done. And so I think as more and more info comes out, I think more and more people are going to become successful. I've actually seen that. You see it in the success ratio especially with archery equipment over the years. People are learning. People are getting better at this true art. This learned experience that's played out in the field as you make decisions, field craft. So, I mean, yeah, is it cold? Yeah, it's cold. But you know what? I can be warm when I crawl back in my sleeping bag at night, and I'll warm back up.
Yeah.
So here's one thing for listeners who well, I'm having a problem balancing out my being uncomfortable and but yet wanting to hunt, is think back to all those times when you were in your office or at your house or whatever, and all the hours you spent dreaming about that moment. I spend thousands of hours for minutes of time of actually doing it. Okay? Mm-hmm. If I can put myself back into that office where I'm sitting there wishing I was out in the field and realize I am in the field and change my freaking attitude, boom, I'll flip that switch. Mm-hmm. Now I'm in kill mode. Okay?
Yep.
Don't allow the experience or the uncomfortableness of the experience for you to miss out on the experience. And I'm not saying you got to be Rambo. I'm not saying you got to freaking, you don't got to be Cameron Haynes and freaking run 200 milers. Come on.
I'm glad you said that because I can't.
I mean, God bless Cam. I ran camera for him when I was with Eastman's, and I've been at his house. I feel like I know him. I mean, we're not close, but the guy has earned everything he's got. I don't know a guy who works harder. But you don't have to do that to be successful, guys. You don't have to be in tip-top shape. One thing I will say is, and you guys back me up on this, when you were an athlete, the better shape you were in, the better mental state you were in. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, because you don't have to think about being tired.
Yep.
Right. So the mind follows the body. If the body is in better shape, the mind's in better shape. Your body's not. You don't have to worry about your body failing you. I mean, it just builds on itself. Okay, so guys that say you don't need to do this, I eat my donuts and that's that's all you need. And well, you know what? I know some of the most. If you look at guys, I know guys that you would look at and you would say, this guy wouldn't even make it up the mountain, and I can't keep up with him. Roy Roth, which was a good friend of Cameron's. I remember Cameron telling me the first time about him. We were actually doing a bivvy camp in Wyoming, and I was a cameraman, and I was laying there, and he was telling me about this guy Roy Roth, who I later met and got a chance to get to know a little bit. I wasn't tight with him or anything like that, but I got to know him just a little bit. Roy was a big guy. If you looked at him, you would think, okay, he probably played a little football in high school. But what did he do after high school? He ate a bunch of donuts. But the guy had a work ethic. The guy had a character. Cam would tell me he'd throw I'm trying to think back exactly, like a big 2-liter of water, throw it in his pack, 2 loaves of bread, and a huge jar of peanut butter. And off he'd go. And Cam said, and I couldn't keep up with the guy walking uphill. I mean, he'd be sweating pickle juice, but he'd freaking but you couldn't keep up with him.
Yeah.
Cam said the guy was so, and I don't know if you guys realize this, but Roy has passed on. He died on a sheep hunt, and Roy was an incredible individual. The industry lost a amazing man when he passed away. And again, I don't know him that well and stuff. I just knew him through Cameron's relationship and the talks that we had, and I met him a couple times. But it's just interesting that you would say, okay, you look at Cameron Haynes and the physical nature of what Cam was, the long distance running, and then he got into the bodybuilding, and then whatever, and then you look at Roy, and totally two different body types, and you would think Cameron's the guy that's going to go. Roy's the one that you're going to he's probably going to be hurting, and Cam, for the way he would put it, was that it was Roy that Cam tried to keep up with. So you don't have to be this guy that hits the gym. But if you don't hit the gym and you're going to come out west, you better be emotionally and mentally just a freaking
just a
beast.
rock. Yeah.
Now, because you know what? You can rest when you're done.
That's right.
You can go into town and get a burger
Oh,
and
That's the best.
kick your
That's the
feet
best.
up, right? Right, I know. And there's not a burger that tastes better than after you've been, on the mountain for a
Yep.
couple of days or whatever.
100% truth, man. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. So I know we've kept you a while. I kind of want to
I
just
could talk about this all day.
Okay. We'll try not to, but I appreciate that. I am kind of interested in the. We talked about like how do you approach the stalk. Then we talked about the last 100 yards. Well, what about the moment of truth? What are some tips you can give us? I noticed during one of your videos you sent us, one of your limbs hit your leg, maybe your knee. What are some thoughts about the shot and pulling that off correctly and being successful in that moment?
I would honestly say practice.
Practice.
Now, how do you practice all these different situations? Well, number one, you're not going to have the adrenaline. You're not going to have the heart beat, the out of breathness perhaps that would happen in that moment. So how do you practice that? Well, go to the alphabowhunter.com. Okay, my buddy Phil Mendoza started a program that talks through the importance of understanding your limitations. We in the bow hunting community talk about our effective range all the time. And would you guys agree with me that in general, we use our effective range is a place where we can go to where we can hit, let's just say, a pie plate, 5 arrows and 5 arrows at that distance, on a calm day.
Mm-hmm.
For years I did it.
Yeah.
I'm dropping bombs at 120 yards. Oh, that's my effective range? No, because I also realized my KE was dropping so much it's not my effective range.
Mm-hmm.
But your effective range has nothing to do with whether on a calm day, at the range you can drop in 80-yard bombs and your group is within a pie plate.
Mm-hmm.
Your effective range is what can you do. And I'm not going to go into this, but there's all these steps to self-govern and to self-test. And I think that's the key, to realistically test yourself at what your range is. But you have to be true and honest to yourself that conditions change, i.e., Dave's 9 yards. There's a 40-mile-per-hour wind. What's his effective range? Well, it wouldn't be 40, I guarantee you what.
Yeah.
At 40 yards, how far would that arrow drift? Heck, I don't even know because I've never shot in 40-yard conditions because it sucks to practice in that, right?
Yeah.
But we know at 9 yards you can get away with it, okay? So that's the key. Now, the alpha bow hunting is also a competition where it's a shooting competition mixed in with some physical. You can go to YouTube to the alpha bow hunting and watch some of the competitions. And what you do is you shoot a 3D course, but then you get ranked and you shoot against another person on a 5-range target that's back-to-back, but you're trying to shoot different distances on different 3D targets, but it's a shotgun clay pigeon. So if you bust the clay pigeon, it's no addition to your time. If you hit in the 8, it's a 20-second penalty. If you hit in the 5 or miss the target, it's a 40-second penalty. And it's a race, but it's also you're rewarded for accuracy. And what that does, and I'm not going to get into all the details. You guys can go check it out on YouTube and the Facebook stuff for alphabowhunting.com or Alpha Bow Hunter, and not Alpha. It's Alpha. Yeah, it's Alpha Bow Hunting, and Alpha. On YouTube and on Facebook, they have a website too. Check it out. But what you're doing is what happens in a situation. Let's say you're 20 yards from that bedded buck, and in a high country western hunt, maybe you had to climb a ridge and you're out of breath. But now your adrenaline is spiked, right? So we're putting ourselves in a condition where we're a little out of breath because we have to carry these sandbags and drag this sled and do a couple of small. It's not a freaking CrossFit competition, guys. It's not like Train to Hunt. Train to Hunt is a really hardcore kind of CrossFit meets bow hunting, which I think is a great thing, and I used to do it all the time. I love the competition. It's really hard on my knees to pack out. They do a race kind of with a meat pack, and I just can't do it. My knees are just too bad to go and race with 80 pounds on my back. So, but it puts you in that exact position where you have to make an 18-yard shot. You have to make a 22-yard shot. You have to, and the whole time you're elevated, your heart is getting elevated, and your adrenaline is a spike. Why? Because you're competing against another guy over there, right? It's the only way I've ever been able to put myself close to that exact same moment before I make that shot.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the combination of all of this, I'm testing myself, and then I know under these conditions what my limitations are. The bottom line is you don't know how you're going to react till you get there. And the killers are going to kill. And the guys that they don't have it, and not that they can't get it, but they don't have it they can't keep themselves composed. They're going to miss. And you know what? I do it all the time. And I show it on video, and people laugh at me because I miss. That's just part of the game, man.
Yeah.
It's called hunting, not killing.
Yeah.
That's why we do it. I'm in there 22 yards. Not even that much wind, and I shoot, and I miss, and I shoot into a bank at 22 yards. I mean, come on. Right? But you know what? That happens. Then I go and redeem myself, but that's why it's hunting. So you have to put yourself there. You have to practice. Let me ask you this right off the top of your head. What pin do you shoot at 1.5 yards?
Like 4 or 5, the 40 or 50 yard pin. I don't know. That's tough.
If it's from a tree stand, I'm shooting my 30.
Every bow's different,
Yeah.
right? But you can figure that out through a couple different things. I mean, for me, at 1 yard, I shoot 71 yards.
Yeah.
For my setup. At 2 yards, I'm shooting 50. You know, at 3, and I have why? Because I freaking went out and did it. Because I expect if I'm in a cliff and I get above a bedded buck, and I might be 15 yards from him, but he's below me, and literally 1 yard is what I shoot it for. I need to know what pin I need to shoot for. Because, and I won't get into elevation shooting. Well, okay, I will. Go back to the Pythagorean theory. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, right?
Yeah.
Okay? So what we're looking at is we're looking at not the true line of sight distance. We're looking from the distance from straight below you to the animal. That's the distance we're shooting for. These angle compensator slash rangefinder deals are close. They're not exact. They're not right. You'll notice that if you take I have a loophole, and I have it on my angle compensator, and I'm shooting a 3D shoot in the mountains, and it's a 45-degree angle, and I check it, and it tells me to shoot for 62 yards, and I shoot over its back. It's close, but it's not on. I mean, that shot's probably going to be closer to 58 if you do the math, and you look at a cut chart. But again, I'm getting more technical. But this is the things you need to know. And if you can, the more variables you can take out of the equation, the more successful you'll be. Like variables, is he still there? Is that buck still bedded? Oh, I can look through my binoculars at my bino buddy, and he tells me the okay symbol.
Bino buddy.
Guess what? I am all relaxed now, right? Because I know that buck's there. I can slow down. I'm taking out variables. He's at 2 yards. What am I going to shoot him for? It's like that turkey I shot in Kansas at 2 yards. I put my 50-yard pin right on its face. Worked out pretty good.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I feel like we could talk forever, but I know we all probably need to get our day started, and I appreciate you taking the time. Where would you send the listener that's interested in seeing some of your footage or finding out more about you guys?
Follow us, IG,
Okay.
Outback Outdoors, Instagram. We do have a Twitter account. I don't ever do anything on it because I just don't need another thing to do.
Yeah, no kidding.
Facebook is still around, although Facebook is slowly petering out just because of the algorithms and how they're clamping down on hunting footage.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, no.
You can go to Vimeo, Outback Outdoors on Vimeo, and watch some of our stuff. The main thing is we're on the Sportsman's Channel. We air at third and fourth quarter at 10 p.m. Eastern on Fridays, our main air time, and then we show three other off times. And then we'll be moving. I believe we're on MOTV, which is the Outdoor Channel's mobile thing. You have to get a subscription, so I'm not a big fan of that. But I mean, if you're a outdoor maniac and you want to watch a lot of different stuff, that's the key, because you've got a lot of content there you can watch on my Outdoor TV, which is MOTV. Check us out there. And then you never know, there might be some Amazon stuff coming up in the near future. I'm not going to say anything about that. It might be a possibility.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, the main thing is follow us on social media, interact with us. We do our own podcast called Inspired Wild. And we started that podcast to really complete the cycle of what we do, which is, of course, filming our adventures. But we do podcasts on every hunt. So let's say you went and watched a show and you're like, oh, that's great. You could go and find the podcast or podcasts. Sometimes when we're there for 4 or 5 days, we'll do 3 or 4 podcasts. And you're going to get a glimpse into behind the scenes because, a TV show is 22 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And there's a lot of stuff that happened that gets cut out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that allows us to expand and really elaborate or maybe share some behind-the-scenes stories. So it kind of completes that cycle.
Yeah.
So check it out. Inspired Wild, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, you can find us. It's hashtag Inspired Wild.
Gotcha.
And sometimes you have to search hashtag Inspired space Wild. Get creative. You'll find it.
Yeah. Young kids will find it for sure. Well, awesome, Trevon. I appreciate your time, man, and all the information, man. I know that stalking is something that is kind of formidable for a lot of people, and so I appreciate your knowledge, your information, and even your inspiration for us to go do that. So anyway, until we can get you back on this thing, I guess good luck turkey hunting this year.
Well, thanks, and you guys too. And stay in touch. Feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any questions, the listeners have any questions, anything more. A lot of what I have to share is life experience. I promise you, I won't just make up stuff. If I don't know, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But some of it is just learning through trial and error. I mean, honestly. Your style might differ from mine. It doesn't make your style wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So
that's cool. We can all learn from each other too, man, on that kind of stuff, And just because something's my style and your style doesn't mean we can learn a little bit from each other, and maybe it'll help us be a little bit more successful in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just one thing I'm going to, again, get back up on my soapbox for this one brief thing.
Let's go.
Here, what in the cornbread heck is the deal with us as a hunting community trashing each other?
Yeah.
I'm going to use this for example. I had a buddy. He shoots a buck, and honestly had some ground shrinkage on this buck, but he didn't post it. It was his first freaking deer with a bow. He didn't even post it on IG because he was so scared of what people would say about the size. I am fed up with people, these keyboard freaking cowboys that forget what it was like to shoot their first deer. Or you kill a spike bull and, oh, why'd you kill a spike? And you know what, you morons? I quit. Just quit.
Yeah.
Just stop. Let's embrace everybody's success and be happy for whatever success people have, instead of getting into this freaking junior high measuring contest. And I'm not going to say what it's measuring, but where we're comparing inches of antler to the amount of adventure we have.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's embrace each other. Let's support each other. This industry is divided because, well, let's just be honest. We're failed humans, and we live selfish lives. So we kind of got a nature that's going to lead to that anyway. Jealousy creeps in, but let's get away with that. Let's get away from that, and let's just support each other. And when a guy posts his Jake that he killed, let's not have our first response, "Why didn't you wait for a Tom?" Let's jump on them and let's encourage these people and let's recruit. We're losing more people every day that are dying from natural causes than we're recruiting into the hunting industry. And if this trend continues, you understand that 94% of the population makes the decision for the 6% of us that are outdoorsmen. 94%. If we keep cannibalizing ourselves, we're going to lose the rights that we have.
Yep.
Okay. Enough about that.
That's a great message, dude.
It is, man. I've said it. I had a stint in the music industry, and it was a similar thing, and I appreciated your comments about Western music, and also about how you listen to something enough, you can find good things in it, and I think that's the same thing. It kind of translates to people. If you are around somebody long enough, there are good things about most people. So let's look for those things instead of look for the bad in them and try to lift a brother up. You know what I mean? I like what you're saying. I like what you're saying. Well, cool, man. We're going to hop off the phone, and we will be in touch, I'm sure, man. We will probably be, at least if nothing else, in November next year, bombarding you with questions about how to use a decoy correctly on a stalk. So
you got it, man. Feel free, and you guys, thanks for the conversation, and God bless.
Sure thing. Back at you. We'll see you, Trevon.
All right. See you, bud.
Man, I definitely had more questions, I think, but he's just so full of information, and we got so much out of him. It's like, how much time are you asking from somebody?
Yeah, for sure, man.
But that was awesome, man. I hope to go back and listen to this around late October next year in preparation for some of our ground game and during the rut this year.
Yeah.
And I don't know. This is an awesome deal. We're going to link to some of his videos or films in the show notes here, as well as our turkey film, which has released. So make sure and go watch that. Let us know what you think. I do know the last turkey that you shot was pretty epic footage.
Oh, so good.
So I'm very proud of that and the effort we put in to go the extra mile there with that footage. But anyway, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and that you were able to glean some information from it. It is something that whitetail hunters don't attempt a whole lot, but it is fascinating, and it's something that maybe we could start using. So anyway, with that said, God bless you guys, and remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.